Cleaners පවුලේ ආරක්ෂාව සහතිකයි.
Tonight, the last chance. As we mark World Environment Day, the UN Secretary General highlights the triple threat to the world.
We are rapidly reaching the point of no return for the planet. We face a triple environmental emergency: biodiversity loss, climate disruption, and escalating pollution.
While President Gotabaya urges world leaders to take decisive action.
We are aware that there will be teething problems. However, as leaders, it is our responsibility to take decisive action despite the challenges.
Promoting separatism, Sri Lanka vehemently opposes UN Resolution 413 that it says supports armed acts to achieve political goals. Crucial evidence. The voyage data recorded from the Express Pearl has been recovered and handed over to the CID for investigations. When it rains, it pours. As bad weather displaces 170,000, the Navy and Coast Guard battle an oil spill in the Colombo floodwaters. All this and much more coming up on this Saturday, the 5th of June, 2021.
Pocket එකට fit වෙන new Axe ticket perfume.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. The world marks World Environment Day today as the globe faces a massive challenge of reversing the vast ecological damage caused by humanity. Addressing the official UN event in Pakistan, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres revealed that with scientists saying that the world has only 10 years left to work on repairing the environment, the need for immediate action has never been more urgent as it is today. Meanwhile, addressing a UN agroecology event yesterday, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa called Sri Lanka's chemical fertilizer and pesticide ban an example of the decisive action required by nations and welcomed any international assistance to assist Sri Lanka's transition.
Today is World Environment Day, and the significance of the issues being promoted on the day are being felt more so than ever by Sri Lanka. With the country facing an unprecedented threat to its environment from man-made sources, the fragility of the world we live in is a fact that we are increasingly forced to accept day by day. The theme for this year's World Environment Day is ecosystem restoration, and with that the United Nations has declared the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration that aims to prevent, halt and reverse the degradation of ecosystems on every continent and in every ocean. With scientists warning that humanity has one last chance in the next decade to attempt to reverse the damage caused, not only to our ecosystem but to ourselves as well, the United Nations has called for urgent global participation to ensure a better world for the generations to come. If successful, the UN says that the world can expect a massive reduction in poverty, better climate resilience, and a prevention of mass extinction of our species. Addressing the official World Environment Day event hosted by this year's host Pakistan, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that with the world facing a triple threat that is completely man-made, the solution ultimately lies with humanity alone.
We are rapidly reaching the point of no return for the planet. We face a triple environmental emergency: biodiversity loss, climate disruption, and escalating pollution. For too long, humanity has cut down the Earth's forests, polluted its rivers and oceans, and ploughed its grasslands into oblivion. We are ravaging the very ecosystems that underpin our societies. And in doing so, we risk depriving ourselves of the food, water and resources we need to survive. The degradation of the natural world is already undermining the well-being of 3.2 billion people, or 40% of humanity. Luckily, the Earth is resilient, but she needs our help. We still have time to reverse the damage we have done. That is why, on this World Environment Day, we are launching the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. This global movement will bring together governments, businesses and civil society and private citizens in an unprecedented effort to heal the Earth. By restoring ecosystems, the task is monumental. We need to replant and protect our forests. We need to clean up our rivers and seas. And we need to green our cities. Accomplishing these things will not only safeguard the planet's resources, it will create millions of new jobs by 2030, generate returns of over $7 trillion every year, and help eliminate poverty and hunger. Science tells us these next 10 years are our final chance to avert a climate catastrophe, turn back the deadly tide of pollution, and end a species loss.
Meanwhile, addressing the agroecology event at the 48th session of the United Nations Committee on World Food Security, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa yesterday stated that heads of state must be prepared to take affirmative action to prevent the loss of biodiversity. The head of state added that Sri Lanka's decision to ban chemical fertilizer and pesticides is one such example of this, and despite any resultant teething problems, the government is determined to work through this with the assistance of the international community to help Sri Lanka move through the transition.
Climate change is one of the most serious issues humanity faces. Mitigating its impact requires urgent collective action from all countries. Individual nations must devise means to adapt to life in a changing climate. Ensuring food security through agroecological adaptation is an essential part of this. Governments the world over must not hesitate to adopt bold policies. Such policies should support ecological conservation, help combat the loss of biodiversity, and enable people to achieve their economic aspirations in more sustainable ways. In April of this year, the government of Sri Lanka banned the import of artificial fertilizers, pesticides, and weedicides. Our decision took into account broader ecological issues as well as significant public health concerns. Use of artificial fertilizers and agrochemicals has been associated with the rise of non-communicable diseases amongst the general public. They have also long been identified with high incidences of chronic illness in the heartland of Sri Lanka, where they have been overused for decades, largely due to aggressive marketing by the agrochemical lobby and a lack of education amongst farmers. It is estimated that nearly 80% of the nitrogen fertilizer used in Sri Lanka is wasted. We are aware that there will be teething problems during this transition. However, as leaders, it is our responsibility to take decisive action despite the challenges we will face. We would greatly appreciate the support of the international community, including multilateral organizations, individual government, climate funds, technical experts and bodies, as well as businesses to strengthen our domestic capacity in organic farming.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වාලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම.
Sri Lanka's ambassador to the United States, Ravinatha Ariyasinghe, has passed on the Sri Lankan government's official response to the proposed Resolution 413 presented last month in the House of Representatives. While opposing the inaccurate, biased and unsubstantiated allegations in the resolution, the letter also highlights what it termed a separatist agenda promoted by supporters of the LTTE and its relabeling of the terror group as an armed independence organization, despite its continued proscription in the US.
Sri Lanka's ambassador in Washington, Ravinatha Ariyasinghe, has formally called on the US House Foreign Affairs Committee not to proceed with Resolution 413 on Sri Lanka, moved on the 18th of May 2021. In a communication addressed to Committee Chair Representative Gregory Meeks, the government vehemently opposed the contents of the resolution on the grounds that it contains allegations that are inaccurate, biased, unsubstantiated, and raised suspicions about the resolution's intentions. It was also observed that the resolution equates the LTT to an armed independence organization, despite its proscription in 1997 and the FBI labeling in 2008 as one of the most dangerous and deadly extremist organizations in the world. The letter also points out that the resolution encourages separatism and questions even the nature of the Sri Lanka state by its references to traditional Tamil homelands. It also added that this not only misrepresents established historical facts and present-day realities, but also contributes to supporting the dismemberment of Sri Lanka, which is the ultimate goal of the LTT and its supporters. While observing that the US position as the consistent defense partner of Sri Lanka, the government says the resolution may lead to an erroneous conclusion that the House supports armed acts to achieve political goals. The letter also reminds the US committee that this would undermine the US administration's own foreign policy foundation of being rooted in democratic values and impact warm bilateral relations between the two countries.
In your latest on the MV Express Pearl saga, the voyage data recorder of the stricken vessel was found today and it will be handed over to the Criminal Investigation Department for further investigations. Meanwhile, the Old Ceylon General Port Employees Union today called for a Presidential Commission probe into the MV Express Pearl fire that continues to cause almost irreversible damage to the country's marine environment. In the meantime, responding to mounting fears over a possible oil spill from the submerged vessel, Chairperson of the Marine Environment Protection Authority, Attorney at Law Darshini Lahandapura, stated that no such leakage has been detected as yet. However, minor oil slicks continue to be seen along the coastal areas of the island. With the country bracing for a possible 300 metric ton oil spill from the wreckage of the MV Express Pearl that currently sits partly submerged, several groups have issued calls for a probe to find out who is to blame for the unprecedented damage to the marine environment. One of the groups, the Old Ceylon General Port Employees Union, has called for the appointment of a presidential commission to investigate the events surrounding the catastrophe. In a letter written to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the union has also requested that a comprehensive scientific study be carried out and also for adequate compensation be distributed to everyone affected by it. The union has also called for experts in the relevant field to be appointed to the commission that will draft a report on action to be taken in a 3-month period. In the meantime, cargo from the distressed vessel continues to wash up on beaches along the western coast of the island, while minor oil slicks too have been reported today as well, which are suspected of originating from the Express Pearl's fuel tanks. Further tragic scenes continue to be recorded today as well of marine life washing up on shore, evidently victims of the plastic pellets and other chemical containments released during the vessel's fire.
कंटेनर කැවිලි ඉවත් කිරීම නැව අයින් කිරීම ඒවත් අපිට යම්කිසි අභියෝගයක්. හැබැයි මේ වෙලාවේ තියෙන පළවෙනි අභියෝගය කියන්නේ නැවේ තෙල් තියෙනවද නැද්ද කියන එක බලලා ඒ පිළිබඳව ගන්න පියවර තමයි අභියෝගය. ඉතින් දානයක් කෙරුවා නැවේ ගලවා ගැනීමේ සමාගමේ ප්‍රධාන කපිතාන්ට වහාම නැව පිළිබඳ සම්පූර්ණ සමීක්ෂණයක් කරලා මට වාර්තාවක් ලබා දෙන්න තෙල් තියෙනවද නැද්ද කියන එක.
National carrier Sri Lankan Airlines has issued a notice to prospective travellers to the United Kingdom, informing them of Sri Lanka being placed on a red list that bars travellers with a 10-day travel history to the island from entering the UK. This will not, however, apply to British or Irish nationals or anyone with residence rights in the UK.
Sri Lankan Airlines has issued a notice to its passengers that Sri Lanka will be added to the UK's red list for arrivals into the country with effect from the 8th of June. Accordingly, passengers will not be allowed to travel to the UK if they have been in a red list country in the last 10 days. However, this will not apply to British or Irish nationals or anyone with residence rights in the UK. Further, passengers with travel bookings on the next 3 Sri Lankan Airlines flights on UL 503 departing on the 5th, 6th and 7th of June will not be affected by the move. Passengers allowed to enter the UK are urged to adhere to a set of guidelines, including having to undergo a COVID-19 test and receive a negative result 72 hours before their travel date. In addition, travellers are expected to book a managed quarantine hotel within a 14-day period before arrival, which includes hotel, quarantine transport and COVID-19 tests on day 2 and day 8 of quarantine. Further, they will also be expected to complete a passenger locator form with details of where the passenger will quarantine when they arrive as well. In addition, a quarantine package invoice number will be required to complete their passenger locator form, the notice added.
The floodwaters in the Colombo city has resulted in another looming disaster, this time to the city's drinking water supplies from the Ambatale and Biagama water treatment plants. This is due to furnace oil stored in underground storage tanks at the Sapugaskanda refinery having become mixed with the floodwaters, which threatens to enter the Kalani River as floods recede. Currently, the Sri Lanka Navy and Coast Guard are engaged in operations to prevent this from happening.
The Sri Lanka Navy and the Coast Guard have commenced another operation to prevent damage from an oil spill, not on the high seas this time, but on land. Following the heavy rains experienced in the past few days, resulting floodwaters have mixed with furnace oil stored in underground separator tanks at the Sapugaskanda oil refinery and overflowed. With that, the oil has now flowed out into the surrounding areas, posing a significant danger to residents. Responding to the situation, the Sri Lankan Navy and the Coast Guard dispatched teams to contain the oil spill before the receding floodwaters carries it into the Kalani River through the Pattivila Canal. Teams are currently skimming the furnace oil off the surface of the floodwaters using an oil skimmer device. Steps have also been taken to place a floating boom around the affected areas to prevent any further spread of furnace oil as well. Navy sources say that these methods are crucial in preventing the contaminated floodwater from entering the drinking water distribution systems at the Ambatale and Biyagama water treatment plants.
Heavy rains have triggered landslides across the country, claiming the lives of at least 6 people and leaving thousands displaced. In one of the tragedies today, 4 members of a single family lost their lives after the house they were residing collapsed in a landslide. With that, Deputy Director General of Education and Research Dr. Hemantha Herath urged the public to evacuate to safer locations as early as possible and not fear COVID-19 infection at temporary shelters, as necessary precautions have been put in place.
A family of 4 in the area of Devanagala in Mavanalla were buried under the debris of a house that collapsed due to a landslide that occurred at around 2 a.m. today. Residents of the area along with army and police personnel began rescue missions soon after in search of the trapped family. Despite the 10-hour rescue mission, tragically only the remains of the family were recovered. According to the Disaster Management Centre, an evacuation notice was issued to the family back in 2018, but the family had ignored the notice. Meanwhile, another landslide was reported in Algama that claimed the life of a 76-year-old man when his house too collapsed. Of the 6 members of the family residing in the house at the time of the incident, 5 managed to escape to safety. In the meantime, the remains of an individual reported missing after yesterday's landslide in Ratnapura was recovered this afternoon. Colombo too was not spared from flooding, with several parts of the city also seen underwater.
කෙලනිකගේ ජලමට්ටම ඉහළ යාමත් සමග ඉන් ආරක්ෂා වීමට වැල්ලම්පිටිය වෙන්නවත්ත ජනතාව අද පස්වරුවේ සිය නිවෙස් වලින් මෙලෙස ඉවත්ව ගියා. This included 500 residences located at the Lake City housing complex in Jayala, which were partly submerged. So far, a total of 15,000 people have been affected by the flood situation in Jayala alone. In addition, some low-lying areas in the district of Kaluthara too were affected by the heavy showers. With that, residents of Anguruwa Tota were evacuated to safer areas by the police. In the meantime, during the past 24-hour cycle, Algama in the district of Kegol reported the highest rainfall for the past 24 hours of 197.5 millimeters. Further landslide warning continue to be in effect for 9 districts, namely Colombo, Gaul, Kaluthara, Kandy, Kegol, Matale, Matara and Norelia, as well as Ratnapura. Meanwhile, according to the latest data from the Disaster Management Centre, 170,022 people have been directly affected by the floods across the island. Of this, 5,182 people belonging from 1,145 families have been evacuated to 33 locations. With that, Deputy Director General of Education and Research Dr. Hemantha Herath today assured the public that all necessary measures have been put in place to prevent any spread of COVID-19 during evacuation procedures.
I would like to urge the public that we need to get ourselves evacuated to safety locations as early as possible. We have already made arrangements to look after the people who will be taken into safety locations in the light of this COVID pandemic, so that additional measures have been taken to look after them, especially to reduce the number of inmates in a given safety location. And also we have already identified the safety locations to which people from different locations need to be evacuated. We have already identified the place to which families or persons who are under quarantine need to be evacuated, and also how to transport or evacuate COVID positive patients. However, all these measures can be done with the limited resources available. So therefore, it is very important to go to a safe place as early as possible when such warning is given, so that there will be no last minute complications that might arise as a result of late evacuation.
Deputy Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardena explained as to why the country's daily COVID-19 infections have continued to stay over the 3,000 mark amidst an island-wide lockdown. He said that the spike in cases can be attributed to positive PCR tests of people before being discharged from treatment centres after completing 14 days of quarantine. Dr. Gunawardena also emphasised that the daily case numbers are not being withheld from the public, as the current mechanism in place does not allow room for this to take place.
Sri Lanka's health sector is facing added pressure from trade union action launched by 24 unions that are demanding PPE kits and face masks in addition to transportation facilities. Responding to the action, Deputy Director General of Education and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemantha Herath, has called on the protesting health sector staff to be mindful of the current situation when deciding on how best to proceed with issues they face.
There has been some allegations that different categories of health staff has been treated in a different manner, but we need to emphasize that all categories of health staff in the health ministry are equally important to carry out our health services, and therefore the Ministry of Health is taking every possible measures to make sure their safety and ensure that activities are carried out to the benefit of the patients as well as to the general public of the Sri Lanka. So therefore I would like to emphasize that there cannot be such discrimination or other type of problems related to the provision of facilities or any other issues related to different health categories. So therefore I would like to urge the health staff that if there is any type of incident or any other situation where you need to discuss this matter with the health authorities, please discuss the issues with the health authorities and then make sure that your concerns are addressed rather than going into trade union action or any other drastic measures which will be detrimental to the provision of health services, especially in the light of nationally important situation of this nature in Sri Lanka.
Meanwhile, the country's overall daily COVID-19 infections rose past 3,000 once more yesterday. With that, a total of 3,398 COVID-19 cases were confirmed across all 25 districts of the country, including 12 foreign arrivals as well. As such, the Colombo district topped the list with 602 infections, while Kalutara recorded 538. With the Gampar district reporting 151 cases, the overall number of infections recorded from the Western province was 1,291. Of yesterday's cases, the Uva province reported the lowest number of cases yesterday with just 81 cases. Meanwhile, 302 cases were reported from the Kurunegala district, 276 from Galle, 268 from Ratnapura and 237 from Nuwara. A further 1,094 cases of the virus were reported across all 17 other districts. In the meantime, Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardena revealed that yesterday's 3,000 plus cases were recorded after carrying out more than 20,000 PCR tests on a daily basis.
අපි දැනටත් PCR පරීක්ෂණ රජයේ සහ පෞද්ගලික අංශයේ දිනකට 20,000 21,000 අතර ප්‍රමාණයක් සිදු කරනවා. එම ප්‍රමාණයෙන් තමයි මේ මාසදියන් සංඛ්‍යාව වාර්තා වෙන්නේ. එතකොට මෙම ඊයේ වාර්තාව 3410න් අපි මොන PCR ද පොසිටිව් වෙලා තියෙන කියලා හොයලා බැලුවොත් ඒයින් වැඩිපුරම PCR පොසිටිව් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ අපි දින 14ක් නිරෝධායනට ලක් කරලා ඉවර වෙලා නිරෝධායනෙන් උදාහරින්න කරන PCR වලින් තමයි ඕන් පොසිටිව් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට ඕන් ඇත්තටම අපේ නිරෝධායන නීති රීති යටතේ සිටපු කාණ්ඩයක්. ඉතින් මේ අයත් එකතුව තමයි මෙම 3400 ගාන ඊයේ අපිට වාර්තා වුණේ. අපිට රෝගියෙක්ගේ PCR පරීක්ෂණය කරාට පස්සේ එහි ප්‍රතිඵල අපි අනිවාර්යෙන් ඒ අදාළ සෞඛ්‍ය වෛද්‍ය නිලධාරීවරයාටත් මාජන සෞඛ්‍ය පරීක්ෂකවරයාටත් වසංගත රෝගයේ ඒකකයටත් අපි දැනුම් දෙනවා. ඒ නිසා අපිට ප්‍රතිඵල කිසිසේත්ම හංගන්න පුළුවන් කමක් නැහැ. අපිට හංගන්න අවශ්‍යතාවයකුත් නැහැ.
In the meantime, the country's overall COVID-19 related death toll rose by 48 to 1,656 yesterday, making it the current highest daily death toll since the beginning of the pandemic. According to the Department of Government Information, the deaths had occurred between the 11th of May and the 3rd of June, with 18 patients having passed away at their residences. Meanwhile, in developments on the vaccination front, 38,943 people were administered with the first dose of the Chinese-manufactured Sinopharm vaccine yesterday. In addition, the overall number of people to have received the second dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine as of yesterday rose by 501 to 351,459. This leaves 573,783 more people awaiting their second AstraZeneca dose. In the meantime, 1,851 more people were discharged from hospitals today after their recovery. This raised the country's overall recoveries to 166,132. Meanwhile, the island's active COVID-19 cases rose by a further 2,280 today to 33,746.
With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.